So let's go ahead and fold this up a little bit and twirl down the arrow for my CSS rules so I can see what my rules are. So let's start with our body tag and taking a look at our sections here. I'm going to click on my edit rule and I'm going to go to my type category and I'm going to change this to 62.5 so that we have something a little bit more to work with. Notice that they've given a color and a line height here as well. You don't necessarily have to do a line height. It's just a general default for all of my items on my page. In this case, the majority of our items are going to be my paragraphs. And the same thing for the general color. Black's just a little boring, so I'm going to take that to just a darker gray. Notice that in my category for my box, I've got a padding of 0 in both my margin and the padding itself. And now I will go back to my type just one more time here, making sure that I have what I want in here. So I've got Verdana, Arial, Helvetica, and then any sans serif. That sounds good to me, and I'll click OK. So now that my page is incredibly tiny, I will go ahead and put that back to normal again with a Command plus or Control plus on the PC and scroll around so I can actually see what I'm doing here. We've got next a margin 0 for our unordered list, our ordered list, and our definition list. We also have a compound selector for all of my H tags and my P tags. What this is doing is giving me a margin top of 0 and a padding left and a padding right. So when I'm taking a look at my page here, I see that my text is not coming up and going flush with the actual container itself, because by default the container doesn't have any padding on it. My elements have padding on them instead. My margin top, let's talk about this again for just a second. We said that elements on my page have a default margin on them. So as a matter of fact, let's take a look. So if I click on my live view and then on my inspect button would like me to switch my workspaces so that I can see my code. And if I click on this, I don't have much room. You're more than welcome to. What it's going to do is it's going to give me a split view so that I can see both the code and the items on my page. Now this is incredibly useful, and this is a CS5 only feature. This was not in any other product of Adobe's before CS5. This one thing totally changes the game for me. I no longer have to open up a browser like Firefox that has extensions in it. I can really choose whatever the heck browser that I would like, and because I can do all of my debugging in here now, I don't have to do my debugging in the browser necessarily. Now we do have Browser Lab for that, and we will talk about that more later on. So as I roll my cursor over these elements, I see both my padding and my margin. So I see that I don't really have any margin above my header 1 tag here. I do have some padding to the left of it, and if I were to scroll over and try and find that again, there I see it on the right hand side as well. Underneath it, however, I do see my padding. So even though in that particular selector rule they didn't specify a margin bottom of anything, by default those elements already have a margin bottom. I also see that for my paragraphs, they were included as well in that particular rule, so they don't have a padding top and they have whatever their default was for the bottom. Using a compound selector like that is very, very handy at making global changes like that for all of my items. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention another type of CSS that is out there by Eric Meyer called reset.css. And all reset really does is items like this. It takes my HTML and all of my tags, and it zeroes everything out. So that way I don't have to worry about what each browser does. I'm building in my own margins and paddings, etc. So it starts out with basically nothing, and then I add my own from that point. So I'm going to take back off the inspect for a moment and my live view so I can actually see just my design view. Going back to my CSS styles and my all. Now let's make this look a little bit different. So this is our tag selector, and we're going to make a rule for this tag that's going to contain properties and values. So I've got my cursor sitting here. In my CSS panel, I have my H1 through H6 and P tag selected, because when I click on my new CSS rule down here, that's automatically then going to include this, and it's going to be underneath where I have selected. It always pops up as my compound selector, and if I choose tag, then it will just then include the H1 tag that goes along with that, which is what I want. So if I click OK now, let's give this different font. Because we have our sans serif for the rest of our fonts, I'm going to choose my Palatino, and we'll give it a different size, making sure that I give it a M instead of pixels, because that would be incredibly tiny. I'm going to change the color of it so that we can actually see we're making some choices. Let's say make it brown. And now I will click OK. So my font size has changed, the font family has changed, and now we can move on to our links.